Yes, it's been a while, a long while. Health tried to keep me down, and like some solitary moods, you could say. They tried it, but they couldn't keep me down. I mean, they did. For at least for 2 weeks. Hello, everyone. This is another episode of my casual conversations with me, Carlz, where I take some commentary I did on movies, TV, and whatnot in Spanish, and I try to put them in English. Uh, it's been quite a week, like in general. I think beyond whatever I could say or talk about, like media wise, it's been quite a week. But that's not really the subject for today's episode. For today's episode, the subject is one that is really dear to. Is it creepy to say to my heart? To say that horror movies are dear to my heart? I guess not, right? I mean, are just movies. Or are they? So today's episode concerns two movies, a commentary in between, and like a broader commentary on the reason why I chose these two movies. I need to like have them really like up on my screen because I keep forgetting like the directors and everything. Well, I'm not a man of details or anything like that, but let's dive right into it. So I want to talk about horror movies, about two horror movies in particular, and a common thread between them, which is genres. So we all know that horror movies is like a big genre, but it's made out of like tiny subgenres, right? Two of them, particularly the ones that I want to talk about in this episode, are the one called slashers and the one called like zombie movies, you could say, right? Or like some people now they call them like infection movie, less like post COVID, maybe outbreak movie, however you want to call it. But there's something really curious about these two genres in particular. One is that they are like one of the most prolific subgenres of horror from like the what past 30 years, which basically means that there's a shit ton of zombie movies and a shit ton of slasher movies, which basically creates this idea of both genres that you can see it in like people who are not that fond of horror, right? They create this idea of, oh, it's just another one of those. Like, how many times have we heard that? Like, oh, it's just one of those. Oh, it's just one of those. But the problem with that is that, well, it could be true. That's one big, not a problem, but one big fact that it could be true. And when that's true, it often means that the movie is not really that special. But at the same time, it could be reductive. It could like not only not represent the movie properly, but sort of like how is that saying? Pull the rug under it, right? Like not allowing the movie to develop and like show whatever it wanted to show. In the case of the slasher movies, we often see like inside the subgroups another sort of subgroups, right? This is my theory that like slashers either focus on the killer, on the victim, or in the phenomena. So the basic examples that I use to this, and the ones that make sense to me, are Friday the 13th series, the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and Halloween series, right? In the Nightmare on Elm Street series, the focus is not completely right. I'm not being like radical, but the focus lays on the victims, right? Because since Freddy plays with their fears, inevitably we see like what makes them tick, as they say, right? How can he kill them more like I was going to say funny, but how can like he kill them more ironically, right? In the Friday the 13th series, like our dear old famous Jason, the focus is on the killer, but not so much in so much depth, right? But the fact that he's sort of like the curse of Lake, what's the name? Crystal Lake, right? There's like a whole deep lore in why is he in the lake, why is he Jason, why is he mortal, etc., etc. There is a lore there. Of course, in Friday, and I mean in Nightmare, there's also lore, of course. Like, these are not radical thoughts, but it's just an example of how flexible the slasher genre could be, right? And in the case of Halloween, which is one of my favorites, especially Halloween 1, the focus is on the phenomena. Like, one of the brilliant parts of Halloween 1 is that Laurie Strode is just a teenager, right? And despite him having like some strange situations, Michael Myers is just a person. But the focus of the movie is this big one night. This big, I mean, not big, but like this Halloween night where everything goes all right. How do you even pronounce that word? AWRY, right? All right. Sounds like all right coming from me, but I'm trying my best. And so it's just this one night, and that's how you consume that movie, like this just almost action like, paranoid, full of paranoid and fear. Like, you get into the mood of this one crazy Halloween night, right? So what's the point of me introducing these elements of slashers is that come 2024, right, one of the like more like it created a lot of noise, or like hype noise, however you want to call it, right? But one horror movie that made a lot of noise in the circuit of horror movies, because of course it wasn't like fucking Marvel or anything, just a small movie, was a movie called In a Violent Nature, directed by Chris Nash. In a Violent Nature is that as a slasher movie, right? But it did this really curious thing of making the focus on the killer, but not in the same way that you could say Friday the 13th series does. No, this is literally a focus thing. So, in brief, the camera just follows him. It's just this like sort of like a little brilliant twist of just making the camera follow the guy. And it's so curious to think about it, mainly because, like, if we think back to Halloween, right, there's a bunch of things in Halloween that is like really hard to explain. Like, sometimes Michael Myers disappears in weird ways, or like he moves faster than a normal human should, right? So in this movie, they make that little question of like, so how about we just follow this guy? What happens in A Violent Nature is more than like some sort of cinematic genius or anything. It's like the first step of what I'm trying to convey in this episode, which is this sort of like meta commentary on genre, right? And like, it might seem an exaggeration, but if you really like horror, it's really hard not to think about these things. The way I see it, especially in this movie, is that I thought about a slasher movie, a horror movie, being like a dome, right? Like a dome. And you can take, like in The Truman Show, that movie, The Truman Show, like you can take a camera and put it in different places and show different things, right? And the problem is that, man, it's not a problem, but the thing is, like, whenever you choose a focal point in different parts of this dome, you sort of like miss so many angles, so many other angles, right? And it's not that changing the angle to the killer shows everything or anything like that, right? And in a violent way, like, the characters, like the victims, are just that, like victims. Like the violence is there, the gore is there, like the creepy assassin is there, like everything is there. Like, if it wasn't for this change of focus, In a Violent Nature would be just a slasher movie. And of course, I said at the beginning that it's sort of like minimizing the effect of the movie. And that is where it comes to play. The commentary of trying to minimize the movie, and the movie doing like a little change to show you that it's way more than the sum of its parts. And that is sort of the brilliant move. Like, you watch In a Violent Nature, like you chase it all around, and like you start wondering these things. Like, and it sort of starts expanding. It expands over the movie itself into other movies of the genre. And I think that is the real strength. Of course, this means that people that are not really that much into the genre or into horror might not enjoy seeing this sort of like commentary on the genre itself, right? And of course, it's fair. But if you enjoy horror, it's really refreshing, because even we that love the genre, I think we still get the the sensibility, right? Desensitize, yeah, that's a word. We get to desensitize about the genre itself, and even we as fans may end up saying like, "Oh, this is just a slasher movie." But like, hold on a minute. Wait a minute. That's how I like to say it in Spanish. There's always more. There's always more. Like, it's no small casualty that these movies have lasted, and so many of them exist. It's not just a money thing, because I don't think like fucking Sharknado 8 made too much money or something, right? Like, or Piranha 5 or whatever. Like, I doubt these movies like broke the ceiling in like money, whatever, however you want to call it, right? So it's good even for us fans to have a small refresher every now and then on how the genre works and how special it is. So in the end, like, unless you are actually sort of like a psycho or anything, and you only enjoy the gore or whatever, like, you enjoy the commentary on this like atmospheric sort of like accomplishment that slasher movies achieve, like the mystery of it, the violence of it, right? The paranoia of it. And it sort of like refreshes everything, but at the same time, it just gives you more of the same. So In a Violent Nature is not gonna like break any box office, or like, I mean, perhaps we will have like a second part, third part, who knows? And if let's say we have 5 of them, or like 7 of them, and if the only different thing about all of them is that they just focus on the assassin, I think it's gonna lose its cachet, right? Maybe it should be just this one, like a small sort of kind of like indie reminder of like, hey, there's like special unique commentary in how this genre works. I'm just gonna move this focal point around and show you how this dome of horror and nightmares works in so many levels. You only need to look for them and you will find them, right? And that's sort of like what I want to recommend about In a Violent Nature. Like, you can't even like really spoil it, because of course I always do these shows spoiler full, right? Like, I don't keep anything back, but this is a movie like you can almost not spoil it because of the way it works. Like, as I said, this sort of like commentary type, like, there's nothing in it that you haven't seen before, but it's so funny. Like, to me, as someone that's been watching this movie for like over 20 years, it felt so refreshing, and I think that is the best thing about it. Perhaps somebody could say the only good thing about it, but like, hey, that's your thing. But let's jump into the second movie, which works in a similar way, but in another genre. So this movie, I don't really want to spoil too much. So I don't know if I can get away with it. So in my Spanish version, I did my best, and I think I managed to do so. But I also thought that I could have said more. But I'm still gonna give you the name, right? So the movie is 2023's New Life, directed by John Roseman. So I already said that this movie has to be do with infections and well, I call it zombies, but it's not necessarily like that. That already is sort of like deals with what I want to say about the movie and what I don't want to say of the movie. What do I mean by this? Like, I don't want to say it so explicitly because I want people to see what the strength of the movie is, right? Similar to In a Violent Nature, New Life is like a little change of perspective in a Contagion type movie, right? But this is even in a more extreme case. So basically, if we do a comparison similar to the one I did with the slasher genre, right? You can think about Contagion movies in like two different steps. One, of course, the prime example of the last 10 years is Contagion, right? With Lawrence Fishburne and Jude Law and whatever, right? A movie focused on the contagion. Then you can have like a whole variety of like post-contagion or post-outbreak. The 28 series, like any zombie movie you want, etc., etc. It seems that everything has been done about it, even from before the outbreak to ways later, like when I don't know, you have like cyborg zombies or whatever, like shooting lasers. Like it seems that everything has been done. Like I don't know, like the savior story, like the hero story, like Will Smith and his dog, who should have never been killed. I think one of the versions of I Am Legend, the dog actually survives. Isn't she? I think it was she. But whatever the case, as similar to the slasher movies, there seems to be no place for like it's not a revolution. It's not that big of a deal, but it seems that there's no place for originality. Like they just put, like in Resident Evil games, right? They just put crazier zombies and call it a day. So these have 7 arms instead of 6. This has like 20 arms instead of 6. Like whatever, right? That's our new thing this year. We have like, instead of Leon Kennedy, we had like, what's his name? Chris Redfield or whatever. That's our novelty this year. Cool, whatever. But like movie wise, New Life does something really special. Not only flips around or like moves around the whole like big spectrum between contagion and like outbreak and like zombie, it moves around and chooses this really peculiar corner of the whole thing and creates such a character focused movie. And it's surprisingly refreshing. Like I can't believe, and as I said, as I usually don't do this during this show, that I try like not to spoil as much as I can, but this one I'm gonna try to do it because the focus of New Life is in the reflection. Like it's not in the characters themselves, nor in the plot itself. Like I intentionally brought Contagion in because Contagion, despite being like the poster movie for COVID, Contagion has also shows this really refreshing moment in the whole pandemic saga, right? Like nobody in Contagion ever becomes a zombie or anything like that. And of course, Contagion movies are not necessarily zombie movies, but they are directly linked, right? Like mismanagement of a disease. Contagion is so obvious, is so in your face, that is somehow even annoying at times. It is as annoying as it is like hurtful to watch, because we all knew that, even though it took some years, we all knew that what they were showing and saying in Contagion was what was going to happen and what did happen during COVID, right? Which is this gross political mismanagement, this like absurd, like, I don't know, political financial interest, like being part of the whole thing, and like corruption, pharmaceutical, like all of that shit happened during COVID. It was real, but it's really a political matter, right? Like a movie like Contagion is that. It's political. Is like how can you say, like real. The horror in the movie comes from that. It comes from the horror of like a critic on society itself, right? And that's all good and dandy. But if you take that same thing and you take it in like to post outbreak movies, you always see these extreme sides of humanity, right? Which is what made famous the Walking Dead saga, for example, right? The extreme expressions of violence, or like instead of the humanity, the lack of humanity that these extreme circumstances can create, right? So there are really so many extremes in it, and it seems that there is no space for subtlety, to being subtle. That is a hard word too. SUBTLE, right? Subtle. What is the correct pronunciation? I think I should look at it later. Subtle pronunciation, right? British pronunciation, subtle. Let's hear it.
Subtle.
Ooh, no, the American one.
Subtle.
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 I like that, like subtle. But it's always gonna sound funny when I say it, but who cares, right? Like the subtle. It seems that there's no space for subtlety in all the spectrum of between outbreak and zombie movies, right? It always seems that there isn't. Like there's always like extreme reactions to extreme circumstances, but New Life finds that place. It's a movie that so eloquently finds it too. Like by choosing the leads it chooses, by choosing the realities they portray, it almost feels like, that's why I don't want to call it a Contagion, an outbreak, or a zombie movie. It seems that it's not using this like extraordinary circumstance like just to show something, right? It seems like it, like the humanity of the characters themselves was the point from day one. And what I want to recommend, and what I want to like really put an emphasis in this case, is that as we do, or as we often do, as I said, with the slasher movies, we tend to forget this, and it's hard to see. Like recently, I've been reading for the first time the Walking Dead comics. Right, they released a color version called the Walking Dead Deluxe, and I've been reading it, and like this subtlety, it's really hard to see in things like The Walking Dead. Like everything is so extreme, everything is so violent, and you can say, yeah, and you can see it like when people like that are less used to horror and stuff talk about zombie movies, and like my mom, for example, like they could go like, oh, but how could they be so mean, or how could they go so far. Like I would never go so far. Like I would never act the way these people do in this extreme situation. Like it's inevitable that you're gonna go there. And it seems that the way these movies comment on humanity is through this extreme contrast. But if we think about it, there's way more like to see and like to enjoy, not in the extremity of it, but in the subtlety of it. And I've been saying subtle a lot recently because I'm just trying not to spoil anything. And just as in A Violent Nature, like this movie is not gonna like break any scheme forever, like make you like oh. But it's a unique movie, and that is what I wanna rescue about it. Just as I do with In A Violent Nature, these are unique movies that sort of keep on refreshing the horror genre as a whole, as and their subgenres in turn. Like we need movies like this to remind us not only of creativity, but also about the flexibility of these genres, about the strength of the messages you can convey through them, and just why we keep watching them. Like besides New Life, I don't even remember the last like zombie movie that I or like Contagion movie that I really enjoy. I haven't seen 28 years later either, right? But even 28 wait, days, month and years, right? Even 28 days later, like when you see that movie, I'm a good bald nobody to go around criticizing fucking Danny Boyle, right? But like if you boil down, if you boil down 28 days later, like it also just follows so many tropes of zombie movies. It's just so uniquely and visually like surprisingly shot that it's just so fun to watch because how it's shot, because how it was made, not necessarily for what it tells us, right? It's not that it has a bad message or anything, right? But it's no groundbreaking. But 28 days later, just as New Life does, gives you this refresher on, dude, these genres are special. They can portray and show unique and special things. That's basically it. Like there's always gonna be like uh I don't know, City Land of the Dead 5 or like Satellite of the Dead or like I don't know, it's zombie Donkey Kong or whatever. Like there's always gonna be one of those. There's always gonna be Sharknado 10 now with less sharks and more like I don't know dolphins, or like I don't know manatees versus seals 5. Now the nightmare is real. I don't know. It's always gonna be more trashy horror movies. And somehow it's really sad that movies like New Life and In a Violent Nature are there just to like us hardcore horror fans or like horror fans at all. This movie should be in the spotlight. And that is sort of like the final thing that I want to say with this. Like, I don't know, we have like a, even though I haven't seen the new Final Destination, yeah, Final Destination, even though I haven't seen that, you get these movies like really brought into the spotlight by the film companies and like I don't know who else make those decisions. Like these horror movies, they get shoved into everybody's face, and it's like, yeah, this is the new shit. Like this is the new great thing. So things like The Substance, like these are like freaks of nature that just seem to happen and be successful like for a moment. But we really need to remember that horror is just like a cheesy sort of like absurd genre that in the mainstream get pushed as that gets pushed as some like freaky stupid thing like to laugh about. We already talked like about like have I talked about? Yeah, like Blair Witch and everything. It seems I always have something to say about horror movies, and that's why I love them. There's always something there. These are unique works of fantasy and fiction. I feel like the more fantastic you get, sometimes it's harder to see how they reflect on us, right? Like in quote unquote reality. But horror, by the gut, pun intended, right? By the guts of the genre itself, are the opposite. They are the ground, sort of like ground level fantasy. So any commentary that you get from them, it is ground level. So ground, human, raw. That's what I mean. So it's always sad when, I don't know, people just care for Final Destination because it was pushed on the cinemas. I would love for New Life to have been like having a bigger push, or in a violent nature to have more push than, I don't know. Was Jason X really pushed on cinemas? I don't even remember. It's a movie that I like, by the way. I like Jason X, but I don't remember how famous it was. Oh, but the latest Halloween revival was highly pushed and highly publicized, right? And the first one is really good, actually. But the first Halloween of the revival is basically Halloween 2. And the second already fell into that category of like, eh. I remember looking into something really special in Halloween 2, but I don't remember right now. You see, it's forgettable. But in Halloween 1 is basically aliens, right? It's like a sequel, the same character, like. But I love how Laurie wasn't like a superhero, but like a broken person. That was great. But okay, I'm not talking about those movies. So to sort of like wrap everything in a tiny, bloody, gutsy bow, these two movies are a must if you like horror movies, and if you like any in the big spectrum of contagion zombie movies, or like if you like slashers, these movies are definitely worth a watch. As I said, they are not as big, not only because they weren't pushed, but because they are like smaller movies, and like they have no higher aspirations. They have no higher aspirations, right? But they are certainly made by people that like horror movies, that like the genres, and that like the storytelling styles. They are refreshing. They are really, like, really greatly made for like having the budget, whatever they have, like probably like, I don't know, $100 or who knows. Like these are really small movies. I don't want to end up by saying that these are horror movies for horror fans, but I think we gotta accept that horror is not for everyone. Many people just want to get their kicks out of like a humanity in like more cheesier ways, which is all good and dandy too. Actually, next week's episode might be cheesy enough if I can get like myself to do it. But anyways, I gotta keep doing this. I gotta keep talking about movies because it's the one thing that I love to do. So, In a Violent Nature and New Life, a couple of really interesting horror movies that I recommend for any horror fan. That's the truth, and that is my truth. And for these 35 to like 40 minutes is the only truth that matters. Hey. So anyways, I'm back. See you everybody next week with another commentary. And if you haven't followed me in like Twitch or anything, I'm planning to do an English speaking project on Twitch that I don't know, something that I just want to do, and hopefully people can be there and help me to practice these muscles to speak properly in English more. Like today that I learned to pronounce the word subtle, and it still sounds weird because it seems that I even pronounce the dash in between the in phonetic alphabet. But anyways, I hope to see you everybody there, or like anyone, and if not, see you next week with another episode with another commentary on films and televisions in my dark corner or bold corner of the internet. Thank you all for listening, and see you next time.